The Turkish Lira has fallen again as markets try to find their footing after a week-long holiday. The currency tumbled 2% against the dollar on Wednesday. It dropped after credit ratings agency Moody's downgraded almost 24 Turkish financial institutions and maintained its negative outlook on the banking sector. Well, let's get more on this now from Taha Arvas, a financial columnist for the Turkish news outlet Daily Sabah. Good to have you back on the program. So let's start with this latest move by Moody's to downgrade Turkey's financial institution. So Moody's says Turkish banks could face a funding crisis if investor sentiment continues to sour, which would in turn limit the bank's access to foreign currency markets. I'm wondering, do you share the same concerns?
Not really, because most of the banks, the major banks in Turkey, are foreign-owned anyway. They're European, mostly are owned by European banks, which have access to ECB windows. So they shouldn't have a problem getting money from the European Central Bank and loaning it to their Turkish banks here in Turkey.
Okay, and Turkey's Finance Minister Berat Albayrak says he doesn't see a big risk to the country's economy going forward, as well as the country's financial system, despite what we're seeing now, the falling lira, increasing debt and the US sanctions. Do you agree with what the minister said?
I mean, notwithstanding that the finance minister has to say things like that, obviously, to prop up confidence in the economy. So that's a given. But the labor reforms that they announced today, that they've been discussing, should help to bring FDI, foreign direct investment, to Turkey. So that should help in bolstering the economy. And also, the tightening of supply of the Turkish lira has helped to slow the depreciation of the Turkish lira. So that, coupled with the labor reforms that are announced, should, like I said, help to recover here.
So share us your views on what's happening to the currency now, because obviously 2 weeks ago we saw that bigger shock to the currency where it fell over 7 to the US dollar. It's kind of plateauing now, 6.5.
Right.
Are we expecting to see further drops, and what might stabilize that?
Well, I think there's two important things to note here. The first thing is that this depreciation in the currency will help macro imbalances come back into balance. So the current account deficit shall improve here. And with that, what we see is the Central Bank of Turkey took steps to curb the use of the offshore Turkish lira, as it's called, just like South Korea did in the Asian crisis, and so too did Singapore. So they were very successful at doing that. So if the Turkish government is able to emulate Singapore and South Korea here, they should have stopped the volatility in the Turkish lira in the near term, and that should lead to both investment and an increase in exports. And if you have those things, then the economy should rebalance and things should go back to normal.
Okay, and we've been speaking to many international analysts, as you can imagine, about this issue, and people outside seem to think that rigorous action from the central bank is needed, particularly around raising interest rates to curb inflation. That seems to be the prevailing thought here.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
I mean, if you're short Turkish bonds or if you're short Turkish equities or securities, that makes sense. You want the central bank to increase interest rates. But this is a country with 80+ million people. People live here, they work here, and so higher interest rates would only make sense if it actually helped. At this point, higher interest rates are going to do very little to help at all. It'll be insult to injury here, and because of the depreciation of the lira here, we're seeing a slowing in consumption, in consumer consumption. So this should very much slow inflation. So I think the next inflation report we see out might, despite the depreciation of the lira, the slowing of consumer consumption will decrease inflation, which will decrease the need for increased interest rates. Like I said, at this point, it would just make no sense to increase interest rates in expectation of solving some macro financial problems, because those things are already going to happen because of this depreciation.
Interesting. Okay, Taha Arvas, always good to get your analysis.
Good to be here.
Well, still to come here on Money Talks. Let's Skype the